In today's episode of Biggie's Tavern, my Star Wars Home Edition pinball machine from Costco is hiding a little bit of a secret over here. Yeah, there's a second speaker that I've added, and I'm going to show you how to do it in this video. To complete this mod, you're going to need a few parts and tools. First, you're going to need a way to actually mount the speaker to the speaker panel. So I designed this part in Tinkercad and 3D printed it. I'm going to post this on Thingiverse in case you want to use the same thing. There's other ways to do it though. You could, for example, make a mounting bracket out of wood, or you could get some machine screws with flat heads and tack them onto the speaker panel with JB Weld. I used this way so that I wouldn't need to do any kind of cutting or drilling or other modifications to the existing speaker panel. Next, you're going to want to get some 18 gauge speaker wire in both red and black. This is stranded copper wire. You'll also need some of these Molex KK.156 terminals. These connect the speaker wire to the main CPU board. Next, we're going to use this 14 gauge wire as a ground daisy chain from the ground connected to the other speaker housing, since the speaker is now going to be mounted to a plastic bracket and would otherwise have no earth connection. This will help to reduce RF interference. We'll terminate that wire on both ends with these terminals that can be placed over the machine screws. When it comes to tools, first we're going to need a socket set. We're also going to need a Phillips screwdriver. We'll need a tool for crimping Molex connectors. I got this one off Amazon. It was pretty inexpensive. It works okay. You should also have a soldering station. It's not strictly necessary. You could use quick disconnects instead, but if you're going to be working on pinball machines, a soldering iron is always a good idea. Also, you're going to want some wire strippers, and you're going to need at least one speaker. I ended up not actually using this speaker. I thought it would be an improvement, but it really wasn't. But nonetheless, just make sure that whatever speaker you get, it matches the impedance of the existing speaker, or you get two with the same impedance. You can change the impedance in the audio configuration. And finally, you're going to need some solder. Well, if you're choosing to solder it anyway. To begin, you're going to want to turn the machine off, and I'd also recommend unplugging it from the wall just to be safe. Next, we're going to want to remove the back glass, so we're going to loosen the two screws on the retaining bracket on top. So one on this side, and we move over to the other side, remove that screw. Then we can take that bracket off, tilt the back glass down, lift up from the bottom, and it's removed. With the back glass out of the way, now we can remove the speaker panel. So to start with, I'm going to lay some microfiber cloths down on the playfield glass so that I have somewhere to set the speaker panel down. There's a Phillips screw on the bottom of each side of the speaker panel, so we'll need to remove both of those. And inside the speaker panel, there's a nut on each side that we need to remove. You'll need an 11/32 socket for this. With the nuts removed, now we can pull the speaker panel up and away and set it down on the playfield glass. Now you'll notice I already have a speaker there. That's because I did my proof of concept. Yours will not actually look like this. I have a hole cut out of the fish paper on mine because I did that as part of my proof of concept, but technically you don't need to do that, especially if you're using the bracket that I designed. That one would take the place of this fish paper, but having said that, I am going to leave that there as a way to kind of dampen any vibrations between that piece of acrylic and my mounting bracket. This is what yours will look like from the factory without that hole cut in it. You will need to use a hairdryer on low heat in order to heat up the adhesive to remove that fish paper because it is stuck to the acrylic using a bit of double-sided tape. I just need to remove these 2 lock nuts. On this side, the only thing I need to remove is the speaker itself. You won't have that green wire daisy chained from one speaker to the other yet, just the one going from the speaker back to the ground inside the back box. Now I'm going to pull this speaker out since I'm swapping it with 2 different speakers completely, but if you were just adding a speaker on the other side, you could leave this one in. Here you can see why I had to create a 3D printed bracket. So there are no studs on that side that match what's already here to hold the speaker in place. There are other solutions you could use. You could tack this on with some JB Weld using a flathead screw. You could also create your own bracket out of wood, for example. To get started on my new wiring harness, I'm going to cut a section of the red wire about 26 inches in length. Now I'm going to cut a section of black wire the same length. I'll start with the side that connects to the board. This is a Molex KK 0.156 terminal. It has 2 spots that crimp on it. This smaller piece in the middle crimps over the wire itself, and these larger wings crimp over the insulation. And this is the part that slides into the connector housing and makes contact with the pin on the board. With the Molex crimper, you can see it's labeled up here 16 to 18, 18 to 20. And you can also see that there's 2 different sides on it. One side slightly larger to accommodate those larger wings that go around the insulation. I'm going to start with the 18 to 16 side. I'm going to load this in so that these larger wings fit in there. And then I'm going to close it down just enough to hold it in place. With it held in place, I'm going to pull it tight so that those little wings are catching on the piece in the middle where it changes size. And I need to strip off just enough of the insulation to match the length of this piece that gets crimped around it. So just a little bit. So I'll put it in the 18 gauge hole in my stripper. And make sure that I have just enough. It's a little bit less than what I wanted. Now I can try to load this in. It's important to make sure that the wire is laying flat against the bottom of it, otherwise it won't crimp in the right spot. Then I'm going to press down. And from there, I'm going to move it to the smaller size. I want to make sure that the wire is laying against the bottom of the connector when I do this. If it's up like this, it's not going to close over it properly. Now you can see how those tabs at the bottom are wrapped around the insulation, and this one's crimped onto the wire itself. And then I can do a pull test to make sure that it's nice and snug, it's not going to come off. So this end is now done. For the other end, we're going to use this side of the Minifit Junior connector as they have on the existing connector that's on the board. And you can see that these are the male pins, and it's really important that you get that correct because there's a different set of pins for this side of the Molex versus the other side. And once we get them crimped on, there's a specific orientation that they have to go in. We want it to match what you see here. Which is kind of hard to see, but we'll show it better as I'm sticking it into the connector. Here's our new Molex Minifit Junior. We're going to use this side. It's also important to pay attention to which side the little locking tab is on. You can see in the existing connector, the black wire is going into the side with the locking tab. There are both male and female pins. So we're going to use the male pins for this side. So I'm just going to break one of these off. And from here, the crimping process is very similar to what we just did for the other end. You can see we have these smaller tabs that go around the wire itself, and then the larger tabs that go around the insulation. So once again, I'm going to strip off just a little bit of this wire, just enough to fit into the end there. Going to load it into the 18 gauge hole. Get it lined up about where I want to pull it off, down. Oh, there we go. Once again, I'm going to do the same thing for this side. I'm going to load this connector into the 18 to 16 hole and then close it just enough to hold it in place. Grab my wire, feed that through. Now, with these connectors, it's critical that you don't crimp beyond where you need to. Otherwise, you're going to have a very difficult time getting it to stay inside the Molex housing. So I just want to make sure that I'm not crimping these little tabs here. These tiny little tabs. And then once again, I'm going to move it to the smaller hole. And again, being very careful that I don't crimp those little tabs. Now we have connectors on both ends. So this side is going to go into this connector housing in this orientation. So you can see little locking tabs on the side here, and this part kind of goes up a little bit. Slide that in. And once it's in, give it a little tug to make sure it's not going to come out. Now we're going to repeat the same process with the black wire. try to start up near the top to give yourself a little bit more room to get the insulation into that connector. Give it a little tug to make sure it's secure. And once again, I'm going to line this up in the same orientation that I did for the red one. Slide it in. You should hear it click into place, and then give it a little pull, make sure it's secure. So, our wiring harness from the board to our quick disconnect is done. And this is how you will insert that terminal into the connector housing on the board, which, by the way, these pull straight off. That connector housing, it pulls off. It's easier if you pull one side and then the other side. We're going to put the red wire into the L plus and the black wire into the L minus. You can see the looped portion faces up here. And then that connector can just be plugged straight back into the board. You actually don't even have to disconnect it in order to put those in. Now we need to make this side that connects to the speaker. These are done using the female pins. So I have a new one of those here, and the female pins. So once again, we need to pay attention to orientation. The black wire is going into the side that holds the locking tab in place. And you can also see that there's two little dots on the side here. And we want to try to line the new one up the same way when we insert it. Crimping these is the same procedure that we've already seen. So I'm going to skip that part and we're going to move along to where we actually insert it into the connector. Now we're going to insert this into the connector on the side that doesn't have the locking tab in this orientation, where we see the two dots here, this kind of ridge at the top, and then our crimp portion at the bottom. Give it a little tug to make sure it doesn't come out, and then we'll repeat that process on the black side. So we want to see these two little dots. The crimp part goes on the bottom here. There we go. Now I need to strip the ends here, enough to get some solder on them and solder them onto the lugs on the speaker. So we want to make sure we get the red wire hooked up to the positive terminal and the black wire hooked up to the negative terminal here. You can kind of see the plus and the minus on this one. I'm not a soldering expert by any means, but I'm able to get this done at least. So I have a damp sponge here I'm going to clean my tip with. And I'm going to put a little bit of extra solder on here. You can see I have my iron set to 725 degrees right now. That nice and clean, so we have a nice surface for it to adhere to. Then I'm going to tin the wire itself. You can see I grabbed the helping hands over here to hold this one. Now you really just need to stick the wire in the hole in the terminal, heat up a little bit more solder on there and flow it through so it's covering the terminal and the wire. And then you can just repeat the same process on the other lug. Now I'm mounting the speaker on the mounting bracket that I 3D printed, and I'm doing that using the M5 machine screws along with the M5 nut. So you just need to hold one side with a screwdriver while you tighten the nut up using a socket. For the bottom M5 machine screw, before I put the nut on, I'm actually going to attach this ground strap that I made. I didn't get a video of me making that, but basically I just took some of that green 14 gauge wire and then I crimped on some of those terminals onto the end of it. So we're going to loop that over the machine screw and then put the nut on. And then the other end of that green wire is going to connect to the other speaker so that the ground is daisy chained from one to the other. So now I've set both speakers down in place, though I haven't secured them down yet. I want to take this ground strap and daisy chain it over to the other speaker first. Future me here. I ended up not liking those other speakers, and I put the cheap Visitons back in because they have a wider frequency range. I'm putting the washer and that lock nut on over both ground straps. And now I can start securing the speakers in place using the lock nuts. Before I connect the wiring harnesses together, I'm going to clean these wires up a little bit using some zip ties. Now I'm going to route this into the existing cable management tie down, just kind of tidy things up. There, looks pretty good. Now I can plug my wiring harness in. And same thing on the other side. And I can lift the speaker panel back up and put it back into place. And when doing so, I need to be very careful that I don't pinch any of those wires in the bottom. So as I lift it up and put it back in, I'm going to check that before I reattach the hardware. And as a reminder, there's a screw at the bottom on each side that needs to be screwed in, and then a nut on each side just inside the speaker panel on the edges. So those will need to get secured back down before you can wrap things up. And here we are putting those nuts back on. Then we can put the back glass back on and then put that retaining bracket back up on top and screw that back in so the back glass is secured. So one thing to note, if you did put in new speakers that are 4 ohm instead of 8 ohm, you can go into the settings here under adjustments and then machine settings and audio configuration, and you can change the back box speakers between 4 ohm and 8 ohm. So by default, mine came with 8 ohm speakers. I assume that's what yours did too. If you put 4 ohm speakers in, that's where you would change it. Otherwise, you can leave it as 8. Well, guys, there you have it. Stereo speakers. It makes a huge difference. The game sounds way better like this. Even just simple stuff like the spinner there, it just sounds so much crisper. I'm a bit disappointed with those more expensive speakers that I got, though I haven't given up on them yet, because when I put the cabinet speaker in, that'll be providing a lot more bass. So who knows? But for now, I'm super impressed with those Visitone, whatever it is. Those speakers I got from Micro Center for $3 each. They actually sound pretty good. I think it's probably comparable to the one speaker that was already in here. So, you could just get an extra Stern speaker, and it'd probably be pretty similar, but yeah, I think it came out pretty good. I already made the wiring harness for the cabinet speaker, but I don't have the 2-position connector housing yet. So there will be a part 2 where I put a cabinet speaker in, and I think that's going to improve things tremendously again. That one should be quite a bit easier. So hopefully this was helpful. If you got some use out of it, let me know in the comments. I'll see you in part 2.